The mountain road curved upward through stands of pine and aspen, their branches heavy with late autumn snow. I rolled down my window despite the cold, breathing in the sharp air that smelled of wood smoke and ice. This was supposed to be my sanctuary weekend, 3 days away from the relentless pace of managing a boutique architecture firm in Denver. 3 days of silence, solitude, and sketching by the fireplace in my mountain house. I had built that house myself. Well, designed it myself, and overseen every detail of construction 5 years ago, when the inheritance from our grandmother finally cleared. The A-frame cabin sat on 12 acres of wilderness 2 hours outside Boulder, perched on a ridge with views that stretched across 3 valleys. Floor-to-ceiling windows, radiant, heated floors. A stone fireplace that reached 20 feet to the vaulted ceiling. It was my masterpiece, my refuge, and mine alone. The property deed had only my name on it. I had paid for everything: the land, the construction, the furnishings, every light fixture and door handle. My sister Diane knew this. Her husband Gregory knew this too, which made what I saw when I pulled into the driveway even more shocking. 4 trucks and 2 SUVs crowded the space where I usually parked. Music thumped from inside the house, bass notes I could feel in my chest even with the windows closed. Through the large living room windows, I could see figures moving around, holding drinks, laughing. The lights blazed in every room. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I sat there for a full minute, processing what I was seeing. Then I grabbed my weekend bag from the passenger seat and walked up the stone path to my own front door. I did not knock. This was my house. The scene inside stopped me cold. 8 men sat around my custom dining table, which I had commissioned from a woodworker in Estes Park. Cards, chips, and cash covered the surface. Beer bottles clustered on my sideboard. The air reeked of cigars, which I expressly forbade in my house because the smell soaked into the wood beams. Someone had moved my furniture to make room for a makeshift bar setup, complete with a keg in a plastic tub. Gregory looked up from his cards. His face registered surprise for maybe half a second before sliding into an easy grin. He was 41, 6 feet tall, with the kind of casual confidence that came from never being told no. His salt and pepper hair was styled carefully despite the casual poker night setting, and he wore an expensive fleece pullover that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "Stacy, hey." He stood, spreading his arms in a welcoming gesture as if I were the guest here. "We thought you were working this weekend." The other men turned to look at me. I recognized 2 of them as Gregory's business partners in his consulting firm. The others were strangers, probably clients or potential investors. All of them held expensive whiskey or craft beer. All of them looked perfectly comfortable in my home. "Yeah, plans changed," I said, keeping my voice level. My heart hammered against my ribs. But I had learned long ago not to show anger when dealing with Gregory. He fed on reactions, used them against you later. "Don't worry about it." Gregory's grin widened. "You want to join us? We've got room for 1 more. Buy-in is $500. $500 for a casual poker game, in my house, without my permission." "I'm good," I said. I turned and walked back out the door, leaving my weekend bag on the floor of the entryway. Behind me, I heard one of the men say something, and the whole group burst into laughter. The sound followed me down the path to my car, across the driveway, into the driver's seat where I sat with my hands shaking on the wheel. I drove back down the mountain in the gathering dusk. Snow began to fall, thick flakes that melted on my windshield before the wipers could clear them. My mind raced through what had just happened, picking apart every detail like an architect examining a flawed blueprint. This was not the first time Gregory had overstepped, but it was the most brazen. 2 years ago, he had borrowed my truck without asking, returning it with an empty gas tank and a dent in the rear bumper. Last Thanksgiving, he had invited his parents to the family dinner at my apartment, without checking with me first, then acted hurt when I pointed out that I had only prepared food for 5 people, not 8. 6 months ago, He had given my personal cell number to one of his clients, who then called me at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, trying to get Gregory to answer some urgent question. Each time when I confronted him, Gregory made me feel like I was being unreasonable. "Come on. Family helps family," he would say. Or, "I didn't think you'd mind." Or, "You're being a little sensitive, don't you think?" Diane always took his side. My younger sister, who I had helped raise after our parents died, who I had lent money to for college, who I had supported through every crisis and heartbreak until she met Gregory 7 years ago. She worshipped him, trusted his judgment over mine, and got defensive whenever I suggested he might be taking advantage. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot in a small town halfway down the mountain. Inside, I ordered a black coffee and sat in a corner booth, trying to calm the rage building inside my chest. He had taken over my house, my sanctuary, without asking, without even a courtesy text message. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. The last text from Gregory was from 3 weeks ago, a group message to the family about where to meet for Diane's birthday dinner. The last text from Diane was from Thursday, asking if I wanted to join them for brunch on Sunday. Neither of them had mentioned anything about using the mountain house. I sipped the coffee, which was terrible, burned and bitter. The coffee shop was nearly empty, just me and a tired-looking waitress wiping down tables. Outside, the snow fell heavier now, coating the street and the parked cars. I watched it pile up and thought about the drive back to Denver, whether the roads would be safe by the time I finished this cup. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane. "Gregory said you stopped by the house. Why didn't you stay? They have plenty of food." I stared at the message. She knew. She had known about the poker party. Maybe she had even helped plan it. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on, "Wasn't expecting company. Thought I'd have the place to myself." Her response came immediately. "Oh, sorry. Greg mentioned he might use it this weekend, but I thought you were working. You're always working on Fridays." Always working. As if my dedication to my career was a character flaw, something predictable and slightly pathetic. Never mind that my work had paid for that house, for the property taxes, for the maintenance and upkeep. Never mind that I had never once used something of hers without permission. I put the phone face down on the table. The waitress approached with a pot of coffee. "Warm up? Please." She refilled my cup. "You okay, honey? You look like you've had a day." I managed a smile. Something like that. She patted my shoulder and moved away. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and tried to think clearly. This could not stand. Not this time. Gregory had crossed a line, and if I let it go like I had let everything else go, he would just keep pushing. He would assume he had access to my house whenever he wanted. He would start treating my property like community family property, and Diane would support him, and eventually I would lose the one place that was entirely mine. But confronting him directly would not work. I had tried that approach before. Gregory was a master at making me look like the villain. He would turn it around, make it about how I was being selfish and territorial, how families should share resources, how I was holding material possessions over relationships. Diane would get upset. There would be tears and accusations, and somehow I would end up apologizing. No. This required a different approach. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. Then I started making a list of facts, the kind of detailed observation list I used when starting a new architectural project. Fact 1. Gregory had entered my property without permission. Fact 2. He had brought at least 7 other people with him. Fact 3. They were smoking cigars inside, drinking heavily, and playing poker for significant amounts of money. Fact 4. He had lied to Diane about checking with me first. Fact 5. This was a pattern of behavior, not an isolated incident. I added more details as they came to me. The way he had greeted me with that confident grin, not a hint of apology or embarrassment. The expensive whiskey on my sideboard, probably from my own collection. The casual disrespect of moving my furniture, of treating my carefully designed space like a generic party venue. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Diane. Greg feels bad that you felt unwelcome. He says come back. They'll deal you in. No buy-in for you since it's your place. I almost laughed. No buy-in, how generous. Permission to play poker in my own house. I typed back. Thanks, but I'm already down the mountain. Have a good night. Then I opened a new browser window and started searching. Property law in Colorado. Trespassing statutes. Rights of property owners. I had a lawyer friend from college who specialized in real estate law. A sharp woman named Patricia, who owed me a favor from when I had helped her sister find an apartment in a building I had designed. I sent her a text, asking if she was available for a quick consultation tomorrow. Her response came 10 minutes later. Sure thing. What's up? Family issue involving my mountain property. Need advice on options. I'm free at 10 a.m. Coffee at the usual place? Perfect. I finished my coffee and headed back out into the snow. The drive to Denver took 3 hours instead of the usual 2, the roads slick and treacherous. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking garage downtown, it was nearly 9 p.m. and I was exhausted, but my mind was clear. Clearer than it had been in months. Gregory thought he could use my house like it was his own. He thought I would roll over and accept it, just like I had accepted everything else. He was wrong. I unlocked my apartment and dropped my bag by the door. The space was modern and minimalist, all clean lines and neutral colors. I had designed this too, converting a warehouse loft into a living space that felt both spacious and intimate. Everything here was exactly as I wanted it. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at the tall windows overlooking the city. Snow fell on downtown Denver, coating the streets in white, softening the hard edges of buildings and cars. Lights glowed in apartment windows. Somewhere out there, people were living their lives, dealing with their own problems and betrayals. Tomorrow I would talk to Patricia. I would get advice, explore my options. Then I would make a plan. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. I met Patricia at a coffee shop in Cherry Creek, a neighborhood halfway between my apartment and her office. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a large latte and her laptop open. Patricia was 43, tall and angular, with short gray hair she wore in a pixie cut and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. We had met at University of Colorado 15 years ago, both of us struggling through an interdisciplinary seminar on urban planning and property rights. We had bonded over terrible cafeteria food and late-night study sessions, and had stayed friends even as our careers took us in different directions. You look mad, she said as I sat down, observant as always. Tell me what happened. I laid out the whole story. The surprise poker party, Gregory's casual assumption that he could use my house, Diane's complicity in the whole thing. Patricia listened without interrupting, making occasional notes on her laptop. When I finished, she leaned back and studied me. What do you want the outcome to be? I want him to understand that what he did was not okay. I want consequences. I want him to never, ever assume he has access to my property again. And your sister? I hesitated. I want her to see who she married. I want her to stop defending him when he does things like this. Patricia nodded slowly. Okay. Here's what you need to know. From a legal standpoint, Gregory committed trespassing. You own that property outright, and he entered without your permission. The fact that he's family doesn't give him any legal right to be there. What can I do about it? Several things. You could file a police report for trespassing. You could send him a formal cease and desist letter. You could pursue a restraining order if you wanted to go nuclear, though that might be hard to justify based on one incident. She paused. But I don't think that's what you want, is it? No. Legal action would just make me look vindictive. Diane would never forgive me. So you want something more subtle? Exactly. Patricia smiled. It was not a particularly warm smile. Then we need to get creative. Tell me more about Gregory. What does he care about? His image, his business, being respected. I thought about the expensive clothes, the carefully styled hair, the way he always positioned himself as the successful entrepreneur, the guy who knew everyone and had connections everywhere. He's building a consulting firm, trying to attract high-profile clients. Everything he does is about maintaining this image of success and sophistication. And he does what, exactly? Strategic business consulting. He helps mid-sized companies restructure, optimize operations, that kind of thing. A lot of his business comes from referrals and networking. Patricia typed something on her laptop. What's the name of his firm? Pinnacle Strategy Group. More typing. Then Patricia turned her laptop so I could see the screen. It showed Gregory's company website, sleek and professional, with photos of him in a sharp suit standing in front of city skylines. The tagline read, "Elevating your business to new heights." Pretentious, I said. Very. Now here's what I'm thinking. Gregory violated your property rights, but he also violated your trust. And he did it in front of witnesses, at what was presumably a business-related event. I think some of those men were potential clients. Even better. So he's using your property to impress business contacts, to create an image of himself as someone with resources and connections, a guy who has access to a luxury mountain house for casual weekend parties. Patricia's smile widened. What if we removed that image? What if we made it very clear to everyone who was there that he was trespassing, that he doesn't actually have the right to use that property, and that you, the actual owner, are not pleased? How would we do that? We could send a formal letter, not threatening legal action, just documenting the incident. Very professional, very official. We send copies to Gregory, to Diane, and to the registered address of his business. We keep the language neutral, but make the facts crystal clear. Then you forward that letter to a few key people. Maybe someone at the company where his biggest clients work. Maybe someone in his professional network who would be interested to know that Gregory is not quite as well connected as he pretends to be. I considered this. It was subtle. It would not look like revenge, just like me protecting my property rights. But it would be devastating to Gregory's carefully constructed image. Would that be legal? I asked. Sending a factual letter documenting trespassing on your property? Absolutely. Sharing that letter with others? As long as everything in it is true, there's no legal issue. You're not defaming him. You're not lying. You're just making sure people have accurate information about what happened. I sipped my coffee, thinking it through. There was an elegant simplicity to this approach. No screaming confrontation. No family drama. Just quiet, professional consequences. Gregory had used my house to boost his image, so I would use the truth to correct that image. I like it, I said. But I want to go bigger. Patricia raised an eyebrow. How much bigger? He's hosting a poker party at my house right now, this very moment. What if I took my house back? Tonight, in front of his guests? You mean show up and kick everyone out? No, I mean show up and make it very clear whose house it is. Be polite, be gracious, but establish my authority. Document everything. Maybe bring a friend or two as witnesses. Let Gregory scramble to explain why he's throwing a party in someone else's house without permission. Patricia grinned. I love it. It's direct, it's asserting your rights, and it puts him in an impossible position. He can't get angry without looking like an entitled jerk. He can't double down without making things worse. And his guests will see exactly who really owns that property. Can you come with me? Absolutely. This I have to see. When do we leave? I checked my watch. It was 11:30 a.m. Give me an hour to make some preparations. Then we drive up together. I'll bring my camera, document everything for the record. We shook hands across the table. My heart raced with anticipation and a sharp, fierce satisfaction. Gregory wanted to play games with my property? Fine. I would show him exactly what happened when you underestimated me. I spent the next hour back at my apartment, making phone calls and sending emails. I called my friend Jordan, who worked as a photographer for an architectural magazine. I explained the situation in general terms and asked if he wanted to join us for the afternoon, maybe get some shots of the house for his portfolio. He agreed immediately. Then I called the security company that monitored my mountain property. I told them I would be visiting this evening and wanted to make sure the system was armed and functioning. The technician confirmed everything was operational and gave me the current access codes. Finally, I packed a bag with a few essentials: my property deed, insurance documents, a printed copy of the alarm codes, and my laptop. I dressed carefully in dark jeans, boots, and a cashmere sweater. Professional but casual. Comfortable in my own space. Patricia picked me up at 1 p.m. in her Range Rover. Jordan was already in the back seat, his camera bag at his feet. He was 29, lean and energetic, with dark curly hair and an easy smile. I had worked with him on several projects over the years, and he had photographed my mountain house when it first appeared in Colorado Design magazine. "Thanks for coming on short notice," I said, as I climbed into the passenger seat. "Are you kidding? This sounds wild. Plus, I've been wanting to get updated shots of that house anyway. The light should be perfect this time of day with all this snow." Patricia pulled out into traffic. "So what's the plan when we get there?" "We walk in like I own the place, because I do. I'm polite but firm. I introduce you both as my guests. I make it clear that I'm spending the evening there, and that Gregory and his friends are welcome to finish their game. But I'll be present. I establish my presence and my ownership." "And if he pushes back?" Jordan asked. "Then I remind him calmly and publicly that this is my house, and I never gave him permission to be here. With witnesses present, he either has to admit he was trespassing or make up some lie that I can contradict with documentation." Patricia nodded approvingly. "I like it. You're not kicking them out, which would make you look unreasonable. You're just asserting your right to be in your own home. He's the one who has to explain himself." The drive took 2 hours through snow-covered mountain roads. Jordan spent most of it looking out the window, occasionally pointing out interesting rock formations or stands of trees. Patricia and I talked through various scenarios, planning responses to different reactions Gregory might have. As we climbed higher into the mountains, my nervousness transformed into something sharper and more focused. This was right. This was necessary. Gregory needed to learn that there were consequences for treating people's property and boundaries as disposable. We arrived at the house just after 3 p.m. The same vehicles from yesterday were still parked in the driveway, plus one additional sedan I did not recognize. Smoke rose from the chimney. Through the windows, I could see people moving around inside. I took a deep breath. "Ready?" "Absolutely," Patricia said. Jordan grabbed his camera. "Let's do this." We walked up the path together. I unlocked the front door with my key and walked in. The scene was similar to yesterday, except messier. Empty beer bottles and food containers littered every surface. The poker game was in full swing at the dining table. Someone had spilled something on my custom wool rug, leaving a dark stain. The air was thick with cigar smoke, despite the windows I had cracked open for ventilation. Gregory looked up from his cards. His expression flickered through surprise, confusion, and then something like annoyance before settling into forced warmth. "Stacy, you came back, and you brought friends." He started to stand. "Don't get up," I said pleasantly. "This is Patricia and Jordan. Patricia is my attorney, and Jordan is a photographer working on a feature about mountain homes. I hope you don't mind if we're here for the evening. I did want to spend some time at my house this weekend." The emphasis on my house was subtle but clear. The other men at the table exchanged glances. One of them, a heavy-set man in his 50s, looked distinctly uncomfortable. Of course," Gregory said smoothly. "Though I wish you'd given us some warning. We could have tidied up a bit." I didn't realize I needed to give warning to visit my own property. I smiled as I said it, keeping my tone light and friendly. But please don't let us interrupt your game. We'll just be in the other room. I walked past the dining table toward the living area, Patricia and Jordan following. Behind me, I heard one of the men whisper something to Gregory. His reply was too quiet to hear, but I caught the defensive tone. Jordan immediately started photographing the interior, focusing on the architectural details and the mountain views through the windows. Patricia settled on the couch with her laptop. I walked through each room, noting the damage and disorder with growing anger that I kept carefully hidden behind a calm expression. In the kitchen, someone had used my expensive copper pots to cook something that had burned and stuck to the bottom. My marble countertops were covered in food debris and ring stains from glasses placed directly on the stone. The trash can overflowed with beer bottles and takeout containers. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos. Every stain, every piece of damage, every sign of careless disregard for my property. Patricia joined me after a few minutes, making notes on her laptop. "This is all going in the documentation," she said quietly. "Property damage, unauthorized use, violation of house rules about smoking inside. This is actually better than I expected for our purposes." From the dining room came the sound of chairs scraping and men talking in low voices. The poker game seemed to have paused. Gregory appeared in the kitchen doorway. Up close, I could see the tension in his jaw, the forced casualness of his posture. "Can we talk? Privately?" "Of course." I gestured to the back deck. "Outside?" We stepped out onto the deck, which wrapped around two sides of the house. The air was cold and sharp, the afternoon sun beginning its descent toward the mountains. Snow covered the railing and the furniture I had stored there for winter. Gregory closed the sliding door behind us. "What are you doing, Stacy?" "I'm visiting my house." "You know what I mean. Showing up with your lawyer and a photographer? Making a scene in front of my business associates?" "I'm not making a scene. I'm being very accommodating, actually. I could have called the police when I discovered you were trespassing." His face flushed. "Trespassing? It's a family property." "No, it's my property. My name is on the deed. I paid for everything. And you never asked my permission to be here. Diane said it would be fine." "Diane doesn't own this house. She has no authority to give you permission to use it." I kept my voice level, matter of fact. "Gregory, you walked into my house without asking, brought 9 people with them, smoked cigars when you know I don't allow it, damaged my property, and treated my home like a rented party venue. How did you think I would react?" "I thought you were working. I thought you wouldn't know." The honesty of that statement was almost shocking. He had not just assumed I would not care. He had actively planned to do this without my knowledge. "So you were hoping to use my house and not tell me about it?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "Look, I'm trying to land a big contract with Westfield Industries. 3 of those guys in there are executives from their company. I wanted to impress them, show them I have connections and resources. The mountain house seemed perfect. So you used my resources to impress your clients. I was going to tell you afterwards. I was going to thank you. But you weren't going to ask permission first." He exhaled sharply, his breath visible in the cold air. "Would you have said yes?" "I don't know. You never gave me the chance to decide." We stood there in silence for a moment. Behind Gregory, through the window, I could see the men in the dining room talking among themselves. Patricia had joined them, chatting pleasantly about something. Jordan moved around the space with his camera, documenting everything. "What do you want?" Gregory finally asked. "An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I should have asked first. Happy now? I want you to understand that this was wrong. Not just inconsiderate, but actually wrong. You violated my property rights. You lied to Diane about having permission. You damaged my house, and you did it all to benefit your business. So what? You want money? I'll pay for the cleaning and any damages." I want you to leave and never come back without explicit advance permission. And I want you to explain to those men inside that this is not your house, that you don't have the right to be here, and that you made a serious error in judgment." His expression hardened. "You want me to humiliate myself in front of potential clients. I want you to tell them the truth." "That's the same thing. If I admit this was unauthorized, they'll think I'm unprofessional. I could lose the Westfield contract. Maybe you should have thought of that before you trespassed." Gregory's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You know what your problem is, Stacy. You're so rigid, so obsessed with rules and boundaries that you can't see the bigger picture. This is family. We're supposed to help each other. Help is when someone asks and the other person agrees. This was theft." "Theft? Jesus, you're being dramatic. You took something that belonged to me without permission. What would you call it?" He shook his head, anger radiating from him now without any attempt to hide it. "I call it you being a selfish, uptight control freak who cares more about property than people. Diane always said you were like this, but I defended you. I said you were just careful, just protective. But she was right. You're impossible." The words stung, but I had expected them. This was Gregory's pattern. When confronted with his own bad behavior, he attacked the person calling him out. He made them the problem. "I'm going back inside," I said. "You have a choice. You can finish your poker game with Patricia, Jordan, and me, present as witnesses to your unauthorized use of my property. Or you can tell your friends the truth about whose house this is and wrap things up. Either way, I'm spending the night here, and you're never using this place again without written permission that I'm extremely unlikely to give." I walked back inside before he could respond. Patricia caught my eye and raised her eyebrows in a question. I nodded slightly. Everything was going according to plan. Jordan had positioned himself near the dining table, photographing the poker setup. The men looked uncomfortable now, their earlier casual confidence replaced with awkward awareness that something was wrong. I approached the table with a warm smile. "I'm sorry we interrupted your game. I'm Stacy, by the way. I own this house." The heavy-set man stood and extended his hand. "Douglas. We had no idea this wasn't Gregory's place. He said his family had a mountain house and offered to host us for the weekend." "His family?" I said carefully, shaking Douglas's hand. "Well, technically his wife's family, but the property is actually just mine. My sister and I inherited money from our grandmother, and I used my portion to build this place. So it's a bit of a misunderstanding." I watched Gregory through the window. He was still on the deck, phone pressed to his ear, probably calling Diane. Another man spoke up, younger, with wire-rimmed glasses and a nervous energy. "Should we go? We don't want to impose." "Oh, you're not imposing. Gregory invited you, and I'm sure he believed he had the right to do so. It's just a miscommunication within the family." I kept my tone gentle, understanding. Not blaming Gregory directly, but making it very clear that he had acted without authority. "Please, finish your game. I'll be in the other room if anyone needs anything." The damage was done, though. The atmosphere had shifted completely. These business executives now knew that Gregory had brought them to a house he did not own, without permission from the actual owner. Whether or not they believed his story about it being a family misunderstanding, the professional image he had been trying to project was shattered. Gregory came back inside 10 minutes later. His face was set in rigid lines, anger and humiliation warring in his expression. He gathered his things with sharp, jerky movements. "We're leaving," he announced to the table. "Something came up. Family emergency." The men began packing up their cards and chips without argument. I noticed several of them exchanging glances that spoke volumes. They knew there was no emergency. They knew something else was happening here. Douglas approached me on his way out. "Thank you for your hospitality, and I apologize for any inconvenience. If I had known the situation, I would never have accepted the invitation." No need to apologize, I said warmly. I hope you enjoyed the mountains while you were here. He nodded and followed the others out to their vehicles. Within 20 minutes, everyone was gone except Patricia, Jordan, and me. We stood at the window and watched the convoy of vehicles disappear down the mountain road. That was masterful, Patricia said. You didn't kick them out, but you made Gregory choose between humiliating himself or leaving on his own. And you came across as reasonable and gracious the whole time. Jordan was scrolling through his camera. I got some great shots of the house, plus plenty of documentation of the damage and the unauthorized party. This should all be useful if you need it later. My phone buzzed. Multiple messages from Diane, each one more frantic than the last. What did you do? Gregory is furious. He said you showed up with your lawyer and embarrassed him in front of clients. Why are you being so petty? It's just a house. Call me. We need to talk about this. I put the phone down without responding. Let her stew for a while. Let Gregory give his version of events. Then I would present mine, with documentation and witnesses. Patricia started opening windows to air out the cigar smoke. Jordan helped me assess the damage to the kitchen and living areas. Together, we made a detailed list of everything that needed to be cleaned, repaired, or replaced. The copper pot was probably salvageable with serious scrubbing. The rug would need professional cleaning or replacement. The countertops could be refinished. The smell of smoke would take weeks to dissipate completely from the wood beams. I want you to draft that letter, I told Patricia. Everything we discussed earlier. Document the trespassing, the damage, the lack of permission. Send copies to Gregory, Diane, and his business. And who else should receive copies? I thought about Douglas, about the way he had looked at Gregory when he realized the truth. I have an idea about that. Let me make some calls first. That evening, the three of us cleaned the house together. It was therapeutic in a way, scrubbing away the evidence of Gregory's violation, restoring order to my space. Patricia proved surprisingly good at tackling burned cookware. Jordan documented the before and after of each area we cleaned. Around 8 p.m., we took a break and ordered pizza from a place in town that delivered up the mountain. We ate sitting on the floor in front of the fireplace, watching snow fall outside the massive windows. Can I ask you something? Jordan said. Why does this matter so much? I mean, I get that he was wrong to use your house without asking. But you seem really invested in making sure he faces consequences. Why? I considered the question. Patricia watched me, curious to hear my answer. Because this is part of a pattern, I said finally. Gregory has been taking advantage for years. Small things mostly. Borrowing stuff without asking. Volunteering my resources without checking with me. Treating my boundaries like suggestions. And every time I try to address it, he makes me feel like I'm the problem. Like I'm being petty or selfish or too rigid. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But this time was different. This wasn't borrowing my truck or giving out my phone number. This was taking over my house, my sanctuary, the one place that's entirely mine. And he did it without even asking because he knew I might say no. That's not just inconsiderate. That's contempt. He doesn't respect me or my property rights, and I'm done letting that slide. Jordan nodded slowly. So this is about establishing boundaries. This is about enforcing boundaries that I should have enforced years ago. I took a bite of pizza, thinking about all the times I had let things go to keep the peace. I've spent my whole adult life being the responsible one, taking care of Diane after our parents died, building my career, staying calm and professional while Gregory pushed and pushed and pushed. And where did it get me? He thinks he can use my house like a hotel, and my sister thinks I'm wrong for being upset about it. Patricia leaned back against the couch. So what's the end game here? You want Gregory to apologize? You want Diane to see who she married? I want them both to understand that I'm not someone they can take advantage of anymore. I want consequences that actually matter. And I want Gregory's professional reputation to reflect the truth about who he is. That last part is the tricky one, Patricia said. We can send the letter, document everything, maybe make some strategic information available to certain people. But you can't control how that information spreads or what people do with it. I know, but I can plant the seeds. My phone rang. Diane. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately, and again. On the fourth call, Patricia said, "You're going to have to talk to her eventually." I know, but not tonight. Tonight I'm going to enjoy my house in peace. We finished the pizza and spent the next hour making the house look presentable again. Patricia and Jordan decided to stay overnight, rather than drive back down the mountain in the dark on potentially icy roads. I made up the guest rooms, putting fresh linens on beds that still smelled faintly of cigar smoke despite our cleaning efforts. Around midnight, exhausted from the day's emotional intensity, I finally checked Diane's voicemails. The first 3 were variations on the same theme: confusion about why I was being so difficult, demands that I call her back, insistence that Gregory had done nothing wrong. The 4th was different. Stacy. I talked to Gregory about what really happened. He admitted he didn't ask your permission. He said he thought it would be fine, but I know that's not how things work. I'm sorry. I should have checked with you first instead of assuming. Can we please talk? I don't want this to come between us. Her voice cracked on that last sentence. Despite my anger, I felt a pang of sympathy. Diane was caught between her husband and her sister, probably genuinely confused about why this was such a big deal. But sympathy was not enough to make me back down. This was too important. I texted her back. We can talk tomorrow. Right now, I'm at the house cleaning up the mess Gregory left. Get some sleep. Her response came within seconds. What mess? What are you talking about? I sent her 3 photos. The stained rug, the burned pot, the overflowing trash. Then I added, cigar smoke in all the wood beams despite my no-smoking rule. Food burned onto my countertops. My furniture moved around and not put back. This is what happens when someone treats property like it's disposable. She didn't respond after that. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling beams and listening to the house settle around me. The silence was profound after the chaos of the past 2 days. This was my space, my sanctuary, exactly as I had designed it, and I had taken it back. But I was not done yet. Sunday morning, Patricia and I drafted the letter while Jordan made breakfast. The language was formal, but not aggressive, laying out facts without editorial commentary. Patricia was good at this, finding the balance between documenting wrongdoing and avoiding anything that could be construed as defamation. The letter outlined the dates and times of Gregory's unauthorized entry. It listed the damage to property. It noted the violation of clearly stated house rules about smoking. It referenced Colorado property law regarding trespassing. And it concluded with a formal notice that Gregory and anyone acting on his behalf were prohibited from entering the property without explicit written permission from me. This is good, I said, reading through the final draft. Professional, factual, devastating. The key is the distribution, Patricia said. We send official copies to Gregory and Diane. We file a copy with the county records office, which makes it public record. And then we can make sure certain other people happen to become aware of it. Like who? Patricia smiled. Like whoever handles vendor and partner compliance at Westfield Industries. Like the networking groups Gregory belongs to. Like the business registry where his firm is listed. We're not sending it directly to those people, which could look vindictive. But if the information happens to be easily accessible through public channels, well, that's just transparent record keeping. I understood what she was suggesting. Make the letter public record, then make sure the right people knew where to find it. Let them draw their own conclusions about whether Gregory was someone they wanted to do business with. Do it, I said. Jordan left mid-morning to drive back to Denver. Patricia stayed to help me finish cleaning and to finalize the letter. By the time she left around 3 p.m., the house was restored to its normal, pristine condition, and the formal documentation of Gregory's trespassing was ready to be filed. I spent the rest of Sunday alone in the house, exactly as I had planned to spend the whole weekend. I sketched by the fireplace. I read a book I had been meaning to get to for months. I cooked myself a simple dinner and ate it watching the sunset paint the snow-covered mountains in shades of pink and gold. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages from Diane, but I didn't respond. She needed time to process what had happened, to see the situation clearly without Gregory's spin influencing her perspective, and I needed time to prepare for what came next. Monday morning, I drove back to Denver with renewed purpose. The mountain air had cleared my head, and the weekend's confrontation had clarified exactly what needed to happen next. Patricia filed the formal letter with the county records office by noon, making it part of the public record. Copies were sent via certified mail to Gregory's home address and his business address. I spent Monday afternoon at my architecture firm, catching up on projects I had neglected while dealing with the Gregory situation. My business partner, a brilliant structural engineer named Helen, noticed my improved mood immediately. "You look different," she said, stopping by my desk with coffee. "More focused." "I had a productive weekend." "The mountain house?" "Something like that." Helen had heard bits and pieces about my family situation over the years. She knew about Diane, about Gregory's tendency to overstep. She had been the one who suggested I put only my name on the property deed when I first bought the land. "Whatever you did, it agrees with you," she said. That evening, Diane finally called instead of texting. I answered this time. "We need to talk in person," she said without preamble. "Can you meet me for dinner?" "When?" "Tonight. Now. Please, Stacy. I need to understand what's happening." We met at a quiet restaurant in Capitol Hill, halfway between her house and my apartment. Diane was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a glass of wine she had barely touched. She looked tired, her usual careful makeup absent, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I slid into the seat across from her. "Thanks for meeting me." "Gregory is furious," she said immediately. "He says you're trying to ruin his business. He got some kind of formal letter today about trespassing, and he's threatening to sue you for defamation." "He can't sue me for stating facts. He did trespass. He did damage my property. Everything in that letter is documented and true. But why did you have to make it so official? Why involve lawyers and public records? We could have worked this out as a family." I leaned forward. "Diane, do you understand what he did? He took over my house without permission. He brought clients there to impress them, using my property to boost his business image. He smoked cigars inside when he knew I forbid it. He damaged my things and didn't bother to clean up. And when I confronted him, he tried to make me feel like I was the problem for being upset. He made a mistake. He should have asked first. But you're making it into this huge thing, and I don't understand why. Because it is a huge thing. It's not an isolated mistake. It's part of a pattern of Gregory treating me like my boundaries don't matter, like my property is his to use however he wants." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "You're my sister. He's my husband. I can't choose between you." "I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to acknowledge that what he did was wrong and that there need to be consequences. But these consequences could destroy his business. Those executives from Westfield Industries, they're not returning his calls now. He thinks you said something to them." I didn't have to say anything. They saw the situation for themselves. They realized he had brought them to a house he didn't own, without the owner's permission. That's all on Gregory. The server appeared and took our order. We sat in uncomfortable silence until she left. Diane wiped her eyes. "He says you've always been jealous of him, that you never accepted our relationship because you couldn't stand to see me happy." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. "Diane, I helped pay for your wedding. I've never been anything but supportive of your relationship, even when Gregory did things that bothered me. But support doesn't mean letting him walk all over me. So, what do you want? An apology? I want him to understand that actions have consequences. I want him to stop treating me like I'm unreasonable for having boundaries. And honestly, I want you to see him clearly, not through the filter of being in love with him. Diane looked down at her wine glass. What does that mean? It means Gregory is good at making himself look like the victim. He's good at spinning situations so that whoever calls him out ends up looking like the bad guy. But the facts are simple. He trespassed on my property, damaged my house, used it to impress business clients, and never asked permission. Those are not the actions of someone who respects me or my rights. He said it was a misunderstanding. It was a choice. He chose to use my house without asking because he knew I might say no. That's not a misunderstanding. That's entitlement. Our food arrived. We picked at our meals in silence for a while. I could see Diane struggling with something, her expression shifting between defensiveness and doubt. The letter mentioned he violated house rules about smoking, she said finally. I didn't know he smoked cigars inside. He knows how you feel about that. He did it anyway, because in that moment, impressing his clients mattered more than respecting my property. What happens now? Now he stays away from my mountain house, permanently, and he learns that I'm not someone he can take advantage of anymore. Diane pushed her food around her plate. He's talking about cutting you out of family events, saying if I invite you to things, he won't come. Then he's making you choose, not me. Stacy, please, can't we find some middle ground here? I thought about compromising, about letting this slide like I had let everything else slide. But I thought about my house, my sanctuary, filled with Gregory's friends and cigar smoke and casual disrespect. I thought about the years of small violations, each one rationalized away. No, I said, not this time. The next few weeks unfolded with a momentum I had not anticipated. The formal trespassing letter became public record, and while I did not directly send it to anyone beyond the required recipients, information has a way of spreading in professional circles. Patricia had been strategic about filing it in such a way that anyone conducting due diligence on Gregory's business would easily find it. The document showed up in public property record searches. It appeared in county legal filings. And it told a very clear story about someone who had violated property rights to impress potential clients. The Westfield Industries contract fell through. I heard about it from Diane, who called me crying, saying I had ruined Gregory's biggest opportunity, but I knew the truth. The contract fell through because the executives had witnessed Gregory's deception firsthand. They had seen him pretend to own property he did not own, had realized he was willing to misrepresent his resources and connections. That was not the kind of person they wanted to work with. Other consequences rippled outward. Gregory belonged to several professional networking groups, organizations where reputation and trustworthiness mattered. When members conducted routine background checks, as they did for anyone in leadership positions, they found the trespassing documentation. Questions were raised. Gregory found himself suddenly excluded from events he had previously been invited to. His business did not collapse, but it stagnated. Referrals dried up. Potential clients went elsewhere. The image he had worked so hard to cultivate, of a successful consultant with resources and connections, cracked apart under the weight of documented facts. I watched it happen with no guilt whatsoever. Gregory had built his professional image on deception and borrowed resources. When the truth came out, the natural consequences followed. I had simply made sure the truth was clearly documented and easily accessible. Diane stopped speaking to me for 3 weeks. Then, one evening in late November, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. "Can I come in?" she asked when I opened the door. I stepped aside. She looked thinner than I remembered, tired and stressed. She sat on my couch and stared at her hands for a long moment before speaking. "Gregory and I are in counseling," she said quietly. "The therapist asked me to really think about our patterns, about the dynamics in our relationship. And I've been remembering things." "What kinds of things?" Times when he made decisions without consulting me. Times when he used my money or my connections without asking. Times when he made me feel like I was being unreasonable for wanting basic respect and consideration. She looked up at me. I've been seeing what you saw all along. I sat down beside her. I'm sorry you're going through this. Are you? Part of me thinks you wanted this to happen. Wanted me to see him clearly. I wanted you to be safe and respected. If that meant seeing Gregory clearly, then yes, I wanted that. Diane wiped her eyes. He's been lying about other things too. Money stuff. He took out loans using our house as collateral without telling me. He's been spending beyond what we can afford, trying to maintain this image of success even as the business struggled. This was worse than I had known. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. The therapist says I need to decide what my boundaries are, what I can accept, and what I can't. But it's hard, Stacy. I love him. Even knowing all this, I still love him. Love and respect are not the same thing. You can love someone and still recognize they're not treating you well. Is that why you never dated much? Because you were afraid of ending up like this? The question caught me off guard. Maybe partly. Mostly I've just been focused on my work, on building something that's entirely mine. Like the mountain house. Like the mountain house. We sat in silence for a while. Then Diane said, I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first. I'm sorry I let him make you feel like you were the problem. I understand why you did. He's your husband. You wanted to believe his version. Can we fix this? Us, I mean. Our relationship. I considered the question carefully. I think we can, but it requires you understanding that I'm going to enforce my boundaries going forward. I'm not going to let people take advantage of me to keep the peace. Even if it causes family drama? Especially then. Diane nodded slowly. Okay. I can respect that. And for what it's worth, Gregory won't be coming around anymore. I told him he needs to apologize to you properly, acknowledge what he did wrong, and respect your boundaries going forward. He's not ready to do that yet, so he's not welcome at family events where you'll be. You're making him choose. I'm making him face consequences. There's a difference. I smiled. You're learning. I had a good teacher, even if I was a slow student. We ordered takeout and spent the evening catching up, rebuilding the connection that Gregory's behavior had strained. It felt tentatively hopeful, like something broken that was being carefully repaired. Over the following months, the full scope of Gregory's professional downfall became clear. His consulting firm lost half its clients within 3 months. 2 of his business partners left to start their own venture, distancing themselves from the taint of his reputation. He had to downsize his office, let go of his assistant, and take on work he previously would have considered beneath him. Through it all, I maintained my distance. I did not gloat or rub his face in the consequences. I simply existed, running my architecture firm, spending weekends at my mountain house, building the life I wanted without his interference. In February, 6 months after the poker party incident, Gregory finally called me. His voice on the phone was subdued, lacking the confident charm I had grown so used to. I owe you an apology, he said. A real one. I'm listening. What I did at your mountain house was wrong. It was more than just inconsiderate. It was a violation of your property and your trust. I used something that belonged to you to make myself look successful, and I did it without asking because I knew you might say no. That was selfish and entitled, and I'm sorry. The apology was better than I had expected. More self-aware. Thank you for saying that. I know it doesn't fix anything. My business is in trouble. Diane and I are barely holding things together. And a lot of that is consequences of my own actions. Not just what happened at your house, but a pattern of behavior that I'm only now starting to recognize. What made you recognize it? Therapy, mostly. And hitting rock bottom professionally. When everything you've built falls apart, you have to look at why it fell apart. And I realized I had been building on a foundation of shortcuts and borrowed credibility. When that got exposed, there was nothing solid underneath. I found myself feeling something unexpected, not quite sympathy, but perhaps a distant form of empathy. Gregory was facing the consequences of his choices, and while I had helped those consequences become visible, I had not created them. He had done that himself. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "Rebuild, but differently. Smaller scale, more honest. Diane and I are working through things, trying to figure out if we can make the marriage work with healthier patterns. And I'm staying far away from your mountain house. That's probably wise." There was a pause. Then he said, "For what it's worth, I understand why you did what you did. The letter, the documentation, making sure people knew the truth. You were protecting yourself and your property. I just wish I had understood boundaries better before it came to that. Maybe this was the only way you could learn. Maybe so." We ended the call shortly after. I did not know if Gregory would actually change, if the lessons of the past months would stick, or if he would eventually slip back into old patterns. That was not my responsibility to manage. What mattered was that I had stood up for myself. I had enforced my boundaries clearly and firmly, and when someone tried to make me the villain for doing so, I had let the facts speak for themselves. Spring came to Colorado with sudden warmth and rushing snowmelt. I spent more weekends at the mountain house, which had truly become the sanctuary I had always intended it to be. No unexpected guests, no violations of my space, just solitude and peace whenever I needed it. Helen and I landed several major projects for the firm, including designing a new community center in Boulder and renovating a historic building in downtown Denver. My professional life flourished in a way it had not when I was constantly managing family drama and Gregory's intrusions. Diane and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. We met for dinner every few weeks, talked on the phone regularly, and found ways to connect that did not involve Gregory. He stayed distant, and I was content with that arrangement. Perhaps eventually we would find some kind of functional family dynamic, but I was in no rush. In late April, Patricia invited me to a gallery opening where one of Jordan's photography series was being featured. The series was called Sanctuaries, and it included several shots of my mountain house taken during that eventful weekend. The images were stunning, capturing both the architectural beauty of the space and something more intangible about the concept of personal sanctuary. Standing in the gallery, looking at my house rendered in dramatic black and white photographs, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had fought for this space, for my right to control it and protect it, and I had won. A woman approached me, studying the photos. "These are remarkable. Do you know whose house this is?" "Mine," I said simply. "Really? It's beautiful. You must love spending time there." "I do. It's exactly what I need it to be." She moved on to examine other photographs. I stayed, looking at the image of my living room with its soaring ceiling and massive windows. The photo had been taken in the late afternoon, with golden light streaming through the glass and illuminating the space I had designed. This was what I had fought for. Not just a house, but the principle that my boundaries mattered, that my property was mine to control, and that I did not have to accept violations to keep the peace. Gregory had learned the consequences of his actions the hard way. His business struggled for months before he finally closed Pinnacle Strategy Group entirely and took a conventional job with a mid-sized consulting firm where someone else called the shots. His professional reputation never fully recovered from the documentation of his trespassing and the way potential clients had witnessed his deception firsthand. The networking groups quietly dropped his membership. The invitations to exclusive business events stopped coming. He had wanted to appear successful and well-connected, but instead he became known as someone who could not be trusted with basic professional ethics. Diane eventually filed for divorce 18 months after the Mountain House incident, citing irreconcilable differences. and Gregory's continued pattern of deception about finances and boundaries. She moved into a small apartment downtown and started rebuilding her own independence. We grew closer during that time, and she thanked me more than once for forcing her to see the truth she had been avoiding. As for me, I continued designing buildings, spending weekends in my mountain sanctuary, and living life according to my own terms. The revenge I had taken was not loud or dramatic, but it was complete and permanent. I had simply made sure the truth was documented, accessible, and impossible to spin away. Sometimes the most effective revenge is not destruction, but exposure, letting natural consequences follow from revealed facts. Standing in that gallery, I realized that the real victory was not in Gregory's downfall, but in my own transformation. I had stopped accepting violations of my boundaries. I had stopped prioritizing peace over respect. I had learned that enforcing consequences was not cruelty, but clarity, and that protecting what I had built was not selfishness, but wisdom.